Hello. Hello, everyone. Today we're here with Mrs. Snarky, Courtney, Heather, and Rachel in reality, talking about how our deconversion stories and how our journeys have been possibly, or maybe not at all, different than a man's journey. Welcome. I'm happy to be talking to you. So, I just wanted to start by letting everybody introduce themselves. So, Rach, do you want to start?
Okay, sure. So my name's Rachel. I'm 23. I'm from Ontario, Canada, and I was raised Pentecostal. So I had lots of crazy supernatural beliefs, and the supernatural realm was a big deal. I really loved Jesus. I like being a Christian, and I thought it was true. It was my whole world up until I went to university, and I was fully convinced for 4 years in university, but slowly I started learning things that didn't quite fit with the worldview that I had been raised with. And I slowly gained an appreciation for science and skepticism and those sorts of things. But I didn't know that I could doubt. I didn't know that I could take my experience and go with that rather than what I had been told. I just kind of held the two conflicting views in my head. And so in my fifth year, I took some courses on the anthropology of religion, and those really started me doubting. But I couldn't consciously think, maybe what I believe is wrong. I just was like really confused. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting, like what I was reading and learning. But so I've always been really interested in YouTube and watched a lot of YouTube. And so I came across some channels where there were discussions between like an atheist and a pastor or an apologist, just long interviews about why they believed and what reasons they had to know it was true. And I had always thought that apologists had all the answers. So to hear them give their answers, I wasn't really satisfied. And so that hearing them being questioned triggered my own questioning. And so it was about a month after that before I was calling myself an atheist. Because, yeah, I had already developed basically like a worldview based off of skepticism and naturalism, but I didn't really know that I could decide to go with that rather than keep my other beliefs. So, and that was almost a year ago. So
very nice. Welcome to the
Thanks.
community. Rachel, you sort of have the same views. You did have the same views as Heather when you were a Christian. So,
Okay.
so just I would like to move to Heather because I think you guys will find a lot in common, and I'd like to bring that to the table. So go ahead, Heather.
Yes. So your story really resonates with me because, yeah, I have a similar background. So I also, Christine and I grew up in the same church, went to the same church.
Heather,
it was also,
sorry, Heather, can you move your mic over so that
yes. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And so we also went to a Pentecostal church, and I also was very invested, just like you were saying, Rachel, in the whole community. I was gung-ho, loved Jesus, all the way, also like you, all the way through college as well. And it's sort of doubt started a little bit in college, but not too, it wasn't really till after college. When I went to do my master's degree that I really started having more doubts. And then now I'm almost done with my PhD. So it's like taken a long time. It's been a long process. And for me, the main thing that really caused me to start doubting seriously is that I'm a literature scholar, and all I do is talk about how texts are reflections of their cultural moment. And I said, wait a minute, how, I'm being trained to analyze text in this way. And how can, one particular text be any different than all of the other texts that I study? And, the Bible is also a product of its many different cultural moments. So anyway, that's in a nutshell what really caused me to start seriously doubting. And I actually identify as an agnostic because there's still a part of me that thinks maybe there's a God. I don't know, but I don't know. And I'm not quite willing to totally reject that, but maybe I'll get there. I'm not sure, but that's how I identify right now. But certainly don't associate with Christianity at all anymore. And for me, one of the biggest things, and maybe we can talk about this more in this Hangout, because this is something Christine and I have talked a lot about, the traditional gender roles and traditional sexualities. Those are some of the things that I really, in particular, have rejected about my upbringing, and they're the things that I think when I think about things that have are frustrating about messages that I heard growing up that were particularly problematic. That's often what I think about, and so it's just interesting because I think it's not, that's not, when I talk to men, I just they don't necessarily have that same experience, because obviously in the Christian church, they were in the positions of like the privileged positions when it comes to gender. So anyway, maybe we can at a later point talk more about that, but that's my story.
Yeah, happy to hear. So yeah, Rachel, you can see why I had to speak next. You're very similar. Courtney, I would like to hear your story, and Mrs. Snarky will set you last, and then we'll get back to our topic. So, Courtney, go ahead. Tell us about your deconversion. I'm really excited.
Hi. I started with Union, which is a kind of non-denominational Christianity. I'm not really sure how widespread it is, but
Never
it's
heard of it.
yeah. There's authors that wrote about it, Norman Grubb and Fred Pruitt. I don't know how widespread those are either. My dad was originally converted by what was his name? Billy Graham, in like a big stadium in Boston when he was a kid. Yeah, and so I don't know. Like my parents had kind of an interesting journey through Christianity, but they're still believers to this day. And I was brought up with what they believe, which is Union, and it's not really the traditional Christianity with a lot of the rules as much. There's still a little bit of stigma around sexuality and around especially homosexuality, things like that. But a lot of the ritual of rules and kind of being like Jesus and all of that, that's more kind of rejected by Union. And Union, it's kind of a watch what Jesus does rather than what would Jesus do, because it sort of takes this concept of like being saved and Christ coming through you as you in your life. So it was a really kind of happy, nice denomination for me compared to a lot of the more strict things, especially around, I guess, also around gender differences too. But I really loved my religion. I really loved the that kind of fulfillment and the idea of having a purpose outside of myself and being of service in that way. And so I really loved that. But then I went to India when I was 19, which is sort of the unusual part about my deconversion. When I was 19, I backpacked through India for a month as part of a youth leadership program. And it wasn't like a religious one, but it was kind of an educational nonprofit. And I was just really hit with the idea that whatever I believe is because of where I was born, what time of the world I was born in. It didn't make that true. And so, you hear about that in America, but you don't really viscerally experience it until you're actually there. And I was sort of confronted with the idea that this religion and this culture is older than mine. And, what does that mean about what I believe? And so I started to question it then. And I wouldn't say I was atheist until about a year later. But I left that and like Rachel was saying, this sort of like sexuality kind of aspect was sort of dropped a little bit after that, around kind of the stigma and the guilt around that, because I didn't like that. And even when I was a believer, I didn't really accept the ideas about homosexuality that a lot of people in my community had. So there were lots of things that I didn't like about my denomination, but I sort of left my denomination, and then I sort of held on to this idea of a general higher power, and I didn't think that I would leave it altogether. I didn't think that I would be without a religion for a long time. And then I took geology in school, and that brought in, the age of the earth and evolution, and it brought in critical thinking first and foremost. And so that was a really big transition for the way that I was looking at the world, and sort of taking my perspective and shifting it away from accepting things because they're coming at me, because they're part of a plan, and kind of taking in whatever I experience and whatever I think as part of that sort of revelation and that purpose.
Sorry, everybody.
You're good.
Baby, let me just mute.
But yeah, so I was kind of shaken. My worldview was shaken by that. And then coming back to school and coming back to kind of what I thought and what I believed, my worldview sort of shifted to a critical thinking kind of scientific worldview. And it made the biggest difference in my life, because I just hadn't thought of the world in that way and myself in that way. And it was very, very empowering and liberating. I found atheism to be extremely positive, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking at the world as part of this plan that wasn't under my control. But it was actually something that the world is the way it is because we made it that way. And so we have the power to change it and to make it better and to make people's lives better. And so that was a really empowering, beautiful thing for me to kind of realize about the world. And I've been an atheist now for about 8 years, and I really love the community. I love the scrutiny around facts and being accurate and having integrity, and showing secular morality to be honestly the basis of everyone's morality, really. And we can talk about that. But this sort of, to me, it's a more superior version of morality, because it's morality with intention. It's morality for a reason, instead of as a result of crime and punishment, or as a result of guilt and shame. So, it's, yeah, the world's happier and nicer than a lot of religions portray it to be. So that's me. And so now I'm president of my local atheist group, Metroplex Atheists, and I'm also a co-host of a YouTube channel that my friends and I do called Atheist Edge, and I've really been kind of embraced into this community. It's really been amazing to be a part of. It's something that I admire a lot. I admire that intellectual honesty and integrity. So it's been really empowering and great. So thanks, guys, for making me a part of this.
Oh, of course. And I totally agree. I mean, I've been quickly welcomed into the atheist community, or the secular community. Everyone in my life wants to interrupt the stream. My cat, baby.
That'll make the views go up. If you have the cat.
The cat always interrupts. Didn't she interrupt on Saturday, Mrs. Snarky? She did, didn't she?
She did, I think so, yeah.
But I found that there's not, it's interesting, because there's not just a level of intelligence, as you were saying. I totally agree, but there's also the emotional intelligence is amazing with this group. And I haven't found a group where I really have felt like, oh wow, these people are just as or more emotionally intelligent than I am. I'm not telling you my emotional intelligent IQ is 140 and they have no idea, but it does feel good to be in a community where you can say things and people can disagree with you in the most loving way possible, which I didn't really feel. I mean, I felt like I was loved in the Christian faith, but it wasn't as embracing. It was like, you'll get over that, or that'll be fixed, or oh, okay, that happens, doubt happens, but we'll get through it together. But it was never like, you know what, you might be wrong, but I love what you're thinking and I love where you're going. And I feel like that is what I found myself feeling in this specific community. You know what I mean? So before I like take it away, go ahead, Mrs. Snarky. I would love to hear your deconversion story. I haven't yet, so I'm excited to do that.
My deconversion story is a very long one, so I'm going to try to condense it the best best of my ability. So I was raised by two fundamentalist Christians, my father being the more fundamental of the two. He considered himself to be a prophet of God. He had bipolar, which some of the misdiagnosed bipolar, but nonetheless, he heard voices and stuff, and ergo, this was the voice of God. Ergo, he's a prophet. So I can't say that we were any one particular denomination of religion other than the denomination of Dad. He definitely had dominion over us.
Wow.
I was homeschooled, young earth creationist.
Same.
I
Not homeschooled, sorry.
I have met people in different, we went from church to church, couldn't find anywhere that we belonged, but we ran into this particular cult that was, I think they were really out there, Pentecostals or something, because they were speaking in tongues and trying to cast demons out of us. I lived into that for 13 years. And then my mom and I escaped because he was abusive, but I won't go into all that. But yeah, I started to lose my faith because I loved Jesus just like everybody else here. We all loved Jesus at one point, right? Jesus is going to save us. Jesus loves me. This I know that. Until after all those years of praying, nothing. No comfort, no joy, no away from abuse, nothing. So I became agnostic at that point, but I also still held the belief that there was some kind of supernatural something, whether it be a collective unconscious mind or whatever, energy. So after my mom died in 2008, I got into the New Age movement, where I believed all is mind and all is God, and therefore I am God. Really crazy stuff. It took critical thinking and close examination to get myself out of that, and I've been out of the woo for a year now. I'm officially an atheist after that experience.
I hear an echo. Do we know where it's from? Let's search.
I don't know.
Is someone watching and then it's in the background?
I turned it. That could be. You might have to mute the live stream if you're using it for the chat.
If you're watching the YouTube to talk with chat, you have to mute it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that Rachel? I was asking Yep, it's Matt. I bet it's Matt.
Godless Island, yeah.
Yeah, I bet that's who it is. All right. Anyway, so we. Nope, it's not.
I think is it better now?
Is it better now?
I don't hear it anymore.
Yeah, it sounds better.
Got it. All right, cool. So anyway, I'm sorry about that. So I'm really, it's really nice to hear everybody's deconversion story. I'm really happy that we're all here because it's unique in that I think the CEO of Atheist Republic the other day stated that statistically there are 30%, atheist community is 30% women and 70% men.
Wow.
Right.
I've never heard that.
Right. And so it's really great. And, that means like 3 million women, 3 billion women. I don't know how many, I don't know what to multiply that by, but it's a lot of women.
Too much math. Too much math. It's turning my brain off.
It's like 3 times X something I don't know. So however many atheists there are, multiply that, but it's still a lot of women. So I'm excited that we're coming here together to sort of base that idea. Like why are we only 30% of the community, and what makes our journeys different? My journey happen in college. Much like many of you, I was not in love with God the whole time. I actually doubted for a really long time. And the more I spend with the atheist community, the more I realize, or the agnostic, the non-believers, the more I realize it was really long. Like probably since I was 9 or 10,
Oh, wow.
I doubted pretty severely. And I remember thinking during worship service, like, I don't know if I feel this, I doubted for a long time. So, so when I finally was willing to admit to myself, I didn't have a community like this. I had myself. And so a lot of the values and the thoughts that I rebuilt took a really long time because I didn't have anyone to talk about it with. Deconverting is way different than growing up atheist. It's also really different than, maintaining Christianity, obviously. And so that was tough for me. So I wanted to bring us all together to sort of talk about how if we've seen any differences between the male deconverts that we've interacted with and the female. One huge difference for me is that when I popped onto the deconversion community, I got a ton of male, follows, and I was like, where are the women?
Yeah.
Where? And obviously, the CEO of Atheist Republic is a woman, so we've got to have enough. We've got to have at least one. But I don't see them. And I'm really glad that I've gotten to meet you. So maybe we'll go in the same order. Rachel, have you interacted with any males and noticed whether there's a difference between your deconversion and their deconversion, or anything starkingly different between you and the male atheists that you know, or maybe you and the male Christians, or what was your journey like? What sort of judgment? How did the women and men judge you, or not judge you, or support you?
It's a lot.
It is a lot. It is. So basically, I'm saying, say whatever you want.
Okay. I wanted to say something about based off what you were saying about the community. So I'm really still right in the middle of the process of recovering and reconstructing my world. I've dealt with so many things this past year where I'm just starting from the ground up everything that I think, and I've been dealing with lots of anxiety, manageable, but still it's been there, and just some psychological issues, and it's been really hard. So I'm glad that I'm able to talk with you guys about these things too, and you can help me figure out these things. At some point, I was wondering if we could talk, because I think Heather or somebody was mentioning about sexuality and those sorts of ideas that you received when you were a Christian. So I think, yeah, purity culture, that sort of thing was a really big deal for me when I was growing up. So that's really affected me. I've had lots of issues with that. But anyways, about me interacting with men, so I think I absorbed a lot of ideas based off of traditional gender roles. I don't remember if I was explicitly taught these things, but somehow they got in me, because I've just noticed it in my interactions with men. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because it's nice that I'm meeting you guys, because I don't have nearly as many, I don't have that many atheist friends, but the vast majority of the atheist friends that I do have are men. And and they're really nice, but I definitely see more men than women. Another community that I'm a pretty big part of is the street epistemology community. Do you guys know what that is?
I'm a big fan.
So in case people who are watching don't know, street epistemology is a method that's used to discuss deeply held beliefs in a cordial way using Socratic questioning. So I'm a huge fan of that. If you go to the Facebook page, I'm always on there. And yeah, there's a lot more men in that group as well. And I personally haven't found any problems with that, but I don't know if that's just me. Yeah.
No, you know what? I haven't either. I haven't found any problems. And the men, and like I said, the men are still really emotionally intelligent, which, you know, I can't say for all the men that I know. But, yeah. So does anybody else have some input on
like the male roles?
Sure, or anything Rachel said, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed the difference in the population. There aren't many women, especially leaders in the movement, and it may just be a percentage of the women involved in the movement. I don't know what would be proportionate, but I'm a big fan of Cara Santa Maria. I named one of my kittens after her. I just love science communication in general, and the philanthropic, you know, value of that. But the you know, I really liked Greta Christina, and there was one of the
Toronto,
horsemen.
Right?
Do it.
She's in Toronto, right?
Greta?
Christina? Is that
I think she's based out of California.
Oh, never mind. Okay, different person.
I think so. Yeah, she's like a blogger, and she's just as much an activist for atheism as she is for LGBT as well. But another one that I really liked was a former Muslim who was a really prominent voice and an author in the movement. And I don't remember her name.
Is it Ayan Hirsi?
I think so. Yeah. Yes. She was one of the horsemen with like Hitchens and Harris and Dennett.
Awesome.
And Hirsi Ali. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's kind of off the top of my head. That's kind of it. You know, there's a lot more atheist prominent speakers that you can point to that are male. And you know, especially as you guys were talking about, you know, in between the genders, there's not many there either, you know, not many transgender people and of other genders. And so, yeah, and I think it has an effect on whether you see yourself advancing in the movement, whether you see yourself having a voice in the movement and being reflected in the movement, and the perspectives that are different from you and other women that may not be understood or expressed by the people with the loudest voices or the most volume applied to their voices. So, you know, it is different to be female in the movement, and also as president of my group, most of my members and most of the board, most of the leadership are male, and it has been interesting because as president, I suddenly have this platform where all of these like older white men listen to me and look to me and respect my opinion and actually, you know, value what I have to say. That's really new just from a personal point, you know.
You go, girl.
It's been crazy. Yeah, it's been really nice because, you know, like I'll think of a solution to something and it'll be something that I think is just, you know, logical and anybody would think of, but then they're like, oh yeah, you know, and it's a big deal to hear, you know, whatever is coming up.
Yeah,
it's really
have the
crazy.
confirmation, right? Yeah, and have that.
Yeah, and so that's really nice because I think that's something that that I've found in the atheist community. I think more so than other communities, at least that I've been a part of. So it's I don't know if that's been the case for you guys, but it does seem to be, like you said, this intellectual and emotional support system that is very forgiving of dissent and forgiving of disagreement and not knowing. You know, I think the atheist community and the scientific community really embraces using the phrase "I don't know" in a way that a lot of other communities don't. So it's respected higher than anything else. I think more so than especially saying something if you're not sure. So I like that about the community. But yeah, the numbers and being reflected and being one of the few women that do have a platform and are heard is rare, I think, and it's nice. But actually, my group, the last like 3 or 4 presidents have been young females. And one of them was a lesbian too. And so it's just, you know, it's been a really, I think my group maybe is smaller, and so it may be more diverse than other groups, but at least from what I've seen in my local groups and my community, it's been a really good support for, you know, it's gender blind in a lot of ways, to where your value and your voice and your participation is put first. So that's really great.
Yeah. Did you find that? I wonder, Courtney, if Union was gender blind.
I think so, especially more than the more organized religions.
Sure.
I've been really horrified learning what other religions teach and what people have to grow up with and grapple with. And Union for me at least was kind of a home Bible study version of religion. We didn't have a church. We didn't have doctrines really. It was about Bible study. It was about a personal relationship with Jesus. And so it wasn't, there weren't a lot of rules and regulations with that. And so I was really lucky in that. And I didn't go to a lot of church services. We sort of went to like a Baptist churches, and I went to Bible study when I was younger, and then just sort of didn't after about 5th grade. But my parents didn't really believe in a lot of the doctrines of the organized religions. And so we were sort of removed, and I was already practiced in questioning what's being said at a pulpit in general. So I think for me, for my deconversion, that was probably easier for me to sort of see myself as apart from churchgoers and the church community and that sort of like camaraderie that comes with that, you know. So that was easier for me. But it is really sad the way that that women are viewed and treated in a lot of religious organizations.
Well,
It's
and then
scary.
And I mean, Mrs. Snarky part of her story was how dominating her father was, you know, and so just that you can see that in just people's deconversion stories, really truthful. So, Mrs. Snarky, did you want to talk about the difference you've seen between men and women deconversions, or even in the Christian faith, something that made you want to leave? Or
Well, in the Christian faith, I wanted to leave because I didn't want to live under authority. I was turning into the age of reason. I was 12 years old and questioning daddy, questioning God. And then it took me some years of bargaining, couple years of bargaining and praying. And I got no answers. So at least at that point, I thought, well, I know that this God, a personal God, isn't here. So if there's anything else, I don't know. But what they have told me is not the truth.
So have you noticed a difference between you and Godless Iowan, like between like your journeys?
Mm-hmm. If there's a difference?
Yeah. Or do you sort of like is that where you find like you're most connected? Or, I mean, who knows? But you know what I mean? Like, is the process the same between the two of you? I don't have someone in my life who's deconverted, who is male, but you're you know, pretty close to someone who has deconverted and is male. So I wonder, like, is there a difference there?
He's able to let things go a lot easier than I have been. For me, like losing touch with my family that I loved, that were still theists or astrologers or and the like, they don't talk to me anymore, and that hurt my feelings. And with him, he told his mom, and his mom cried, and he was fine with it, but he was also like, if this makes her cry, I can't do anything about it. And I was like, well, you need to find a new normal and tell her that you do love her. And he did, and now they found a new normal. But for me, I still don't talk to my family. So
I wonder if there is, I don't know, psychology. I'm trying to read some stuff so that I can help people who are deconverting get through the process. But I don't know it very well. But I wonder if there is some social acceptance there. That women are expected to be like more like-minded as their family and men are sort of allowed to, and that might be an old stereotype that I'm thinking of that maybe isn't as prominent now, but I wonder if it's there.
Maybe that the males guide the spirituality.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
also thinking that, I'm also thinking women are more in tune with their emotions. I mean, not every woman, I think I am, but not every woman is. But I'm just thinking that possibly the emotional manipulation type aspects of religion might be more effective on women than on men. So I don't know. In my upbringing, there was a lot of like, don't think for yourself type mentality, like not explicitly, but don't lean on your own understanding. And so I was supposed to lean on other people's understanding. And a lot of times that was people in authority, and the people that were in authority were men. And so I think the men in positions of power, they were able to use their critical thinking faculties.
Right.
Because they were in the position where they had to take control and be in charge of those sorts of things. So,
sorry.
It's okay.
You're good. My degree's in psychology.
Cool.
Nice.
So I don't know if you guys have any questions around that. But I've taken it's a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I'm going for a PhD in a year. I'm going to start that program.
Fantastic.
I kind of want to look at deconversion maybe. So this might be right up my alley too. But the only thing I'm not sure about the differences in indoctrination affecting women versus men. But I will say that in terms of gender roles, the way that men are treated and the way that women are treated just by everyone, by men and women, from birth is different. And
yes.
And so maybe the way that they are allowed, that men are allowed a voice more so, and allowed an ability to think critically in the community, and maybe risen up to become leadership if they're chosen for that, versus women sort of having a very defined role. And I think in general, whether you're a male or female, it may just have to do with our human tendency to conform and to be accepted into a community and to be understood and loved. And so it may be more about what's happening externally to women more so than men, versus how we are accepting it, maybe.
Yeah. Heather, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I was going to add, I think, I'm really agreeing with everything you guys are saying. And I think I just wanted to add that I think that especially in growing up in the Christian community, I think that we are, we're talking about social conditioning here, especially with gender roles. Certainly from my experience, as a woman, we were taught to defer to authority, like a couple of others of you were, saying in our discussion. And we were, in my experience, there was lots of gendered language used. So things like women are kind, women are compassionate, women are sweet. There was, in our particular, the church that Christine and I grew up in, that was a word that was used a lot, and again, very coded, gender coded, right? That word was used only to describe women. And so I'm wondering if maybe that's part, obviously this is a complicated, huge question, but I'm wondering if that's part of the answer to why there are fewer women who are at least are outspoken in the atheist or, secular community, maybe because there's still that hang up that we have from our social conditioning. I certainly have struggled with that. I've gotten much better because I'm in academia, which is also, Courtney, you were talking about how you feel more empowered now in your community. And I've had that same experience also in the academic community, and it's been great. I'm like, oh, men actually want to listen to me and for what I'm saying intellectually. And it's this crazy, wonderful experience. But I still struggle. One time recently, I teach classes at the university that I'm doing my PhD at, and I had another female senior faculty member ask me to guest lecture in her class. So I came in, I gave the guest lecture, and afterwards she was giving me feedback, and she said, Heather, the content was wonderful, but you are doing these things that are very gendered. So she said, you apologize a lot when you are telling your students what you want them to do. And for example, I do things like I have a high-pitched voice. There are mannerisms and just ways that I present myself, even when I am an authority figure, that I think are not natural necessarily. They're things that I've been conditioned to perform in this way as a woman. And so there's still hangups. And in the sweetness and the kindness, I still sometimes behave that way when I wish I could just be more assertive. So anyway, so that's one of that's biggest sort of, and sorry, I'm echoing. I don't know if you guys can hear me, so it's distracting me a little bit. But maybe I'm the only one who can hear it. So anyway, that's one of my biggest. You can hear it. I wonder if it's my microphone. Okay, so that's one of the things that I'm still working through and think a lot about in terms of my upbringing, and then one other thing I'll add too is I also think we as women, or at least in my experience, we weren't given choices. So, and I know this is a broader problem. This isn't just in the Christian community, but I think it's maybe more exacerbated in my community. But I was never, my only options for my future were being a wife and a mom. And my role models growing up were all women who got married young and had children young. So I didn't, until recently, I didn't really understand how beautiful having choice is, especially as a woman at a young age. You can be who you want to be. I know that sounds cheesy, but that to me, that in my experience was lacking when I was growing up. That was the only model that I had to look forward to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, what happened? Oh, there we go. Heather, I think you just need to speak farther away from the mic. Just let it sort of catch your voice far away. We're not recording anything, so I don't think it matters. Okay. Yeah, so go ahead. Someone was going to respond.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I grew up I have 4 sisters, so I don't have any brothers. So women kind of run my house. So I didn't really feel much like the patriarchy in my house. And like I said, like the messages were there, but they were not like, I don't remember ever hearing like a sermon preached on Paul and women's place in the church. I don't remember ever hearing that, but I think the ideas were still there. And I had a lot of like different exposure in like a big church. So like the church that my family goes to is pretty large, not like huge, but large-ish. So I think that there's a lot of different ideas that kind of went around. I think if you go to a small church or one that's very into like one denomination, it's the doctrine is a lot more
strict.
Yeah, like strict. So my church is like between Pentecostalism and non-denominationalism, I think. And I had a few different influences. So I had that church, and then I grew up living every summer at a Christian Pentecostal camp. And so that was a little bit more towards the Pentecostal side. And I had lots of experiences growing up there at camp. And then I went to a Christian school that was supposed to be Pentecostal, but it was really, I don't know, probably more like Baptist. I don't know. I was very much in a bubble. So all this like the world is really large, and I I don't know a lot about all the different denominations, but I'm just trying to figure it out. Yeah, so I think there was some sort of messaging, and there was definitely like the older generation in my church and in people that were around me were more like patriarchal, however you say that. But I think just my generation growing up wasn't as much that, thankfully. So
that's good. Yeah, as I said before, I haven't really known anyone. I mean, if I take some time to think, I still can't. I really deconverted on my own. Like there is not a single male. There's one I know of who just recently deconverted. There's not a single male in my personal life, not my internet life. There are plenty of internet life, but not too many. But yeah, so I don't have this. I don't have anything, to sort of add to this. But in terms of the patriarchy was one reason why it was easy to leave the church, and so I'm really glad to be free of that. And I'm really glad to be in an environment where there really doesn't seem to be as much gender differentiation, at least that isn't beyond the social faux pas that we make already. Because I think there are accidental things that I do all the time, and I'm like, no, like it's from my background, like rearrange your thinking. You can you need to see people for including, just setting up the stream. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because I do think we go through different things, but it was one of the first things I thought, like, oh, I need to talk to women. But, the truth is, like, men are actually really emotionally intelligent. They are really, like, embracing and forgiving. And I'm really excited about that. And they do, specifically, I've felt like Graceful Atheists and I have a similar idea on a lot of things. And it is nice to relate to someone and feel like I'm not different from them in any way. I feel really equal to the people around me, and I appreciate that, definitely.
Yeah, Rachel, I really identify with your like not knowing very much about the different religions and your kind of what ideas are out there when I first started. So that's common, because there's not a lot of what they call it, religious literacy, especially I would say in the US. And then Heather also, I really, really identify with your kind of apologizing all the time when you're in, and I think, like you said, Heather, it's not exclusive to religious, but I think it is magnified by it, like you said. So yeah, definitely. And I think that's the difference of experiencing this community and kind of the world in general as a female, is that you do have the expectation and of behaving a certain way or relating to people in a certain way, and having certain needs and wants that you may not actually have, and it seeps into your skin in a way that that you take on personally. But there was a really good TED Talk, see if I can find it, that was about it was a transgender woman who had transitioned from being male and sort of moving through the world as a male and then moving through the world as a female. I think this is a really exciting time around transgender, where there's a platform and a voice for them to give us the perspective of both genders in a way that we haven't been able to see before. So that's really exciting, because it's that was a really good talk. It was a TED Talk.
If you find it, send it in and I'll mention it.
Yeah.
So we do have some questions from the people who are viewing our chat, and I just want to hit them Each one of you can answer. There are 4 right now. Can answer one. And if you have
one thing that I wanted to mention or
Go
discuss.
Ahead,
so I'm pretty good friends with like 2 guys that I met through the Street Epistemology Facebook group, and one thing that I think could be different between their, or at least the one guy's experience and mine, is, and I wanted to talk about this, is like how they understood Jesus when they were a Christian and their relationship with him. So when I was a Christian, I really loved Jesus. And like when I was younger, I was kind of a lonely kid. I was bullied a little bit and I didn't really have that many friends. So Jesus like was my friend. Like he was my legit imaginary friend and I really loved him. And then like, I don't know, on and off, like I loved him more or less as I got older. But there was times when even like a couple years ago where like I would talk to him like constantly and he was just like, I don't know, just always there. And so my friend was saying that he never viewed Jesus as this best friend character. It was always just like a father figure. So I'm wondering what your guys' experience with that was.
Well, I will say, oh, oops, I'm going to leave the microphone still. I wanted to respond. I think that's a great point, Rachel. And it's interesting because I didn't view Jesus like a friend, but I do think I also viewed him differently than men. And that I actually viewed him more as a kind of lover in like a romantic way. The kind of Pentecostal background that Christine and I come from, we had this it's really hard to explain if you weren't part of it, but we had this kind of understanding that God was like this lover for us. And we even had this song that we danced to called, okay. Never mind. We'll keep that private.
I've never heard that before.
No, go ahead, Heather. I'm just saying I didn't feel like that. I just Jesus was not my boyfriend.
Okay, fair enough.
Don't let me in there.
We did not have the crush on the same guy. Sorry about that.
No. Okay, that's fair. No, that's fair. So yes, I'm not speaking for Christine. Just to say, you know what I'm talking about, because in our church we had this. There was this song by Paul Wilbur called Dance With Me. It's a popular song in Christian groups anyway. And we had a dance that we did in church where we literally had one of our friends who was like dressed like a bride and was, it was supposed to sort of, anyway, because of the allegory of the church is like the bride of Christ, right? Christ like the bridegroom. In my experience, that kind of got appropriated to like me individually and my individual relationship with God. And I don't mean anything weird. I wasn't like, it wasn't like Ecstasy of Faith, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with like medieval women's writings, where
that sounds really cool though.
Yes,
women's writings. That's awesome.
Yes. Ecstasy of Faith is a genre. It's a thing in medieval writing, medieval women's lit, and it's basically when nuns would describe their experience with the Holy Spirit as like a sexual experience, and it's really fascinating. You should look into it. Yes. But anyway, it wasn't like that, but it was just that I did kind of, so what you were saying, Rachel, about how you feel like your relationship with Jesus was different than that of your male friends. I also feel that way.
Oh, yeah. Another thing. So my friend, he talks about how, he lives in Texas and there's lots of Christian women around him, but not a lot of atheist women. And so he talks about how Jesus is basically these girls' boyfriend. And he can't compete with that. And I remember like, so I when I was in high school, I didn't date anybody and I was totally fine with that because I already had a best friend who was like super close with me, would always accept me. I didn't need any sort of external attention or validation from boys because like I had Jesus. So I don't think that was very good. And I'm sure that like other girls experience the same thing.
Yeah, I had a similar experience and it also has affected my dating life, although I've gotten over it for the most part now, but it took me a long time because I had a hard time, like you said, like I also had this vision of a boyfriend as being this perfect, you know, person because of what I just described, and also because I read a lot of Christian romance novels. I don't know if any of you read those.
Oh yeah, we have so many of those at my house.
Yes. So yeah, it took me a long time to realize dating is complicated because men are actually real people and not this, you know, perfect, you know, guy up in the sky.
Isn't that the truth?
I know I'm talking a lot, but I want to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
So I think another thing, like with my relationship with Jesus, was that I really, I think my part of my, either from my deconversion or was like already there in my beliefs, was like I had a delay in the development of my agency and personal responsibility. And so I would really rely on like Jesus and God for like emotional comfort when I was like going out and doing something. So not having Jesus anymore, like I didn't rely on him all the time.
Oh, did it? Yeah.
Did it cut out?
Highway and different things. I feel like I really like long for that comfort again, but I
Uh-oh, Rachel. No. She did. Oh, all right. So we'll continue until, and then she'll probably interrupt me in the middle of a sentence. Poor girl. But we'll see if she comes back. For now, though, I want to ask a couple of the questions because they asked us questions on the chat, and I want to ask them to each person. Is there one that's been upvoted many times? Is there anything we do to make you feel more welcome? How can we be available to you? So that was from a male, I think, and so he's asking if there are other things that that they can do to be more available or make themselves more available.
To make them more available to us.
Yeah.
Well, see it, say it. That's about all I can.
See it,
my back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Sorry.
be. If you see,
you're back,
witness,
Rachel. Yes, you're back. Go
Cool.
ahead, Mrs. Snarky. Finish what you're saying.
Sorry.
Back to Rachel.
if you witness anything unfair or atrocious or harmful going on, say something, and don't just think that it's none of your business and all this other stuff. That's another element of the faith, is it's not your business. It's between them and God. Well, no, it's not. It's between us and human beings that need help. So
yeah,
that's more or less.
Yeah, I think that's a good, I have other questions that have been asked. So if you guys want to, if anyone wants to continue on that, go ahead. And then if not, I'll ask another question.
I'd agree with that, like with the regular community too, about, you know, that he for she kind of concept of men's voices being not only necessary but valid in this sort of equality fight. And I think also, you know, just being a person with integrity, and you know, there are a lot of men that listen to women, that believe women when they tell them something, and that really hear you when you speak, and, you know, don't just kind of like think of something next to say while you're talking. And, you know, those men are extremely valuable to the world and to our community. And so it's just making sure that, like Snarky said, that, you know, just that you are using that voice and that you are that person, and making sure that you continue to be that person, and just, you know, nobody's perfect, and just strive to be the change you want to see in the world, as cheesy as that sounds, but I think it's absolutely true. So
yeah, definitely. There's another question that I think is really interesting. let's see, it says, can you speak a little on how you rationalize the patriarchal aspects of your faith while you were practicing? So sort of now reflecting back, how did you rationalize those things, or did we just accept them as you know what I'm saying?
I didn't rationalize it. As soon as I was old enough to understand, I went, no, this is wrong.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what I did, and ever since.
Yeah, and Rachel, you said you didn't really feel it as much.
Yeah, I had a lot of strong women in my life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we had strong women. Now, don't get me wrong. There were strong women in the church, but at our church, there are women who are fantastic pastors who are not allowed to speak in front of church, or who haven't been for a long time. And so there were wonderful, strong women. And I will never say that just because a woman is, well, I shouldn't say I will never say things, because I tend to say things right before I say I never say them. So I might, but the women in our church were actually, they may be sweet, but they were powerful.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And so it's just that the board that we had was so patriarchal and dominating, that they didn't allow those strong women. Those women had to fight for where they even are now.
Right. And it wasn't, I think the difference is that the strength wasn't celebrated, because I agree with you, Christine. It was like this weird juxtaposition where we knew these women that had this steeliness to them, but that wasn't, in the community that we were a part of, that wasn't what was respected or valuable, at least officially, in the way that it was articulated to us. And so I think that, and the things that were sort of, especially according to the board of elders, and these people, the people who were in charge, what was respected and valuable was being a wife, being a mom, being in positions of leadership, but in like more traditional ways, right? So like women could be in charge of childcare, women could be in charge of dance.
Worship and dance.
Worship.
Which is different a little bit from some fundamentalist communities. So we did have leadership roles, and she still had a strong, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I love that, like, Heather and I have this like there's a dialogue that's happening like in our brains. Yeah. The people we grew up with. Yeah. I do agree. I do think the leadership was interesting, because the leadership was recognized, and I disagree with you a tiny bit, Heather, not entirely. It was recognized, but it needed a man's approval.
That's interesting.
Yes, it needed sort of this like, well, if you want to go up and speak it for the church, you need to talk to so-and-so, or you need to be, you need to tell so-and-so what you want to say and have it approved. And that's sort of how I felt it was for us, So it was, So in terms of rationalize that the patriarchy, it wasn't about, for me, it wasn't about that wasn't the thing I needed to rationalize. The things I needed to rationalize are how they treated youth, and why we weren't allowed to date. What the hell is the 6-inch rule? Like,
was that strictly informed, or was it just told? Or strictly like regulated, or was it?
Oh, strictly, yes. It was
okay.
6-inch rule you're talking about? Yeah. Oh yeah. We had fun, lots of jokes about that. But there were other things I think that I noted, because I was young at the time, and as I grew up, I sort of got away from the church, and there are a lot more female leaders in the university community. So I didn't see that patriarchy later on, and I felt a lot better about being a Christian in college. at least the first couple of years that I was, it wasn't as strong as, and I think even by that point, I was like calling God a she or a he. Like I never really labeled, I sort of had gained that myself. You know what I mean? I was just like, maybe he's not a guy. I think you guys that funny. I think, but the Bible, I mean,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how I rationalized that. I probably should have. Yeah, I should have deconverted.
That's one good way to begin your deconversion. Is just read the Bible. That alone will do it.
Yes. Be a strong, independent, mindful woman and read the Bible and see if you're like. Wait, I mean, granted, there are still strong women in the Bible, but a lot of them are supporting males. A lot of them are supporting the men in their roles, The only
it's
one
also,
who
it's also a different type of strength too.
Yeah, I mean Ruth is
and getting the man, and then there's Esther, and
Ruth was the first judge, so she's all right.
She's all right.
She's okay. She's accepted, right?
I was wondering. Okay, so I think for myself, I just kind of had all the beliefs that I'd been told, and I didn't actually think about them until all of a sudden I thought about them, and so then I didn't spend a lot of time rationalizing them. I just kind of had them.
Yes.
So I think a lot of people spend like 10 years like thinking about their faith and thinking through all the doctrine and what they believe about it, whatever. But I didn't really have that. So now I'm thinking back like, okay, well, I was taught this, but I don't believe that anymore. So I remember being taught about just the verses that, or for gender roles, I think of a lot of it that I learned was to do with like your role as a wife and a mother, and to do with purity and things like that. Did you guys get like purity talks? I don't know if you guys went to youth group or whatever, but where they like split up the girls and the guys, and then they tell you all about how women are supposed to be. Yeah, I went to those, and I had like.
Can you guys describe that a little more? I wasn't part of that. That sounds really.
Yeah, sure. So I went to like a few different things like that. So yeah, I had that in youth group. This one camp that I worked at had like a little talk like that once a week with like the leadership at the camp.
Whoa.
So this was a camp that I worked at for the like when I was older. Like that was my job. So I've been to like 2 camps. So there's one that I grew up at, and then the one that I worked at, both Christian camps. But anyways, so yeah, there's a lot of talk about purity, and you're supposed to like dress a certain way, and you don't want to make men stumble, and things like that. And we just learned about how like you're supposed to be in submission to your husband, but it wasn't like you can't. I don't know. I feel like that was like downplayed. Like technically you're supposed to be in submission, but it wasn't like you can't do what you want. It's just kind of like a technicality, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know.
Like
but
the
then
wedding
I don't
vows.
know, it's rationalized as like, but the man loves you. So I don't know. I just kind of thought like he had the final decision. Or something.
Yeah,
Like
they sort of justify it by like the man's job in return is to honor their wives, and so it's supposed to be like a mutual honoring and respect, but it is really imbalanced. It's really women like serving their husbands and obeying their husbands even in like wedding vows, and men honor their wives, but they don't like submit to their wives or obey their wives. They consider them in their decisions, but they are the decision makers. So I'm really not sure if that aspect of like marriage and those traditional gender roles, I'm sure they predate Christianity, but I'm sure that they also, Christianity itself has probably like exasperated that and maybe prolonged the gender roles being so like strict.
I'm not sure if well, it depends on who you ask, but they didn't predate Christianity if you're a creationist, right?
Oh dear.
But anyway,
did anybody like those gender roles? Because when I was growing up, like I've always loved like period movies and shows, and I grew up watching Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah.
Me too.
Different things like
me
that.
too.
So I always thought like having a man like take care of you and just like letting a man lead, like I was totally okay with that. And now I'm like, okay, that's not actually the way it is, and it's not probably the way it should be. So I have to, like, I'm totally fine being like responsible for myself and making my own way, but it is kind of a struggle when you didn't think you had to do that.
Yeah. I relate to that. I actually did. So I was that person that bought into the traditional gender roles for a long time. And there is something comforting in a twisted way, but there is something comforting about having an assigned role. And also I totally bought into the idea of difference, like what we would call essentializing, right? So like the idea that women are essentially this way, like I was talking about earlier, like women are essentially kind and compassionate and emotional and nurturing. And so it wasn't until I started pursuing my career and my studies that I realized that I really like being a very different kind of woman. But that's taken me a long time. So for example, right now I'm almost 30 and I don't even know if I want to get married. I'm pretty sure I don't want to have kids. And I'm sort of finally getting to a point where I'm like, what is the life that I want? Because I can actually have any life that I want. I don't have to, my life doesn't have to involve marriage and a family if I don't want it to. And now I'm like excited by that and thinking about the future, but it did take me a long time to get there. I had a period of time where I was really anxious, and I had a period of time where I was really felt very conflicted because there was a loss involved in sort of losing that traditional romantic idea. And we were just talking about purity, and I felt that way about sex as well. Like I grew up with this idea that, the wedding night was going to be this beautiful thing and sex for the first time. And now I'm at a place where I enjoy sex outside of marriage. Surprise, surprise. I don't know if anyone but
you would have thunk it.
But it did take me a long time to get there. I mean, there was a loss. There was anxiety when I started to experiment sexually. I felt a lot of anxiety about that, and because I was saying goodbye to the Christian romance novel trope, that I grew up with. So
you're losing something that's real to you. Yeah. Even though it wasn't real in general, it's real to you, and it's just as real in that way. And I sort of experienced that. Definitely, the abstinence was like the first thing to go when I deconverted. I was like, no longer believe in that. I think my God's okay with that. All right. So that, had a boyfriend at the time and whatever. But I also, I think in general, what you lose when you deconvert, outside of kind of the gender differences, is a very real concept of a person and a purpose in your life. And I really identify with the idea that it's really scary to walk into the world and feel like there's no longer this set guide or a set person looking out for you, or a plan ahead of where you're going to be and everything's going to work out, and all the things that people still say in the culture. It's really scary to walk out in that world, but it's also, as you get used to that idea, it's extremely empowering and exciting and liberating to feel like you can decide who you are and what's important to you and what you want to leave, an impression on in the world, and what you want to change and what you care about. It's really, really exciting and empowering to feel like you have the freedom, but also the capability, because when you live in this mindset that you are this broken sinner who doesn't have the capacity to be your own person and to decide who you are, it's all given to you from this divine being. When you let go of that, you are your own person, and your identity and what you want and who you are is all up to you. And so you not only have the responsibility, but you have that capability. That's all up to you, and you can decide, and you have that power. So that was really exciting and liberating to me. I really loved that about getting out of that mentality.
Yeah, I had a I had a purity ring for a while. Anybody purity ring?
Yes.
I have one.
That had little crosses.
I actually
at my
still
house.
wear it, but that's just because it was from my dad, so it's still special, even though it does not have that meaning anymore. But
I had one. It was funny. I was actually still a Christian on the path to not being a Christian when I lost my purity ring. And the next day I was like, well, I'm not joking.
Oh,
That's how
wow.
it went. That's for real how it went. Like I was
It
like,
seems subconscious.
must be God. It's fine, Christine. You're gonna be an atheist someday anyway. Don't worry about it.
Oh man.
But yeah, but I do understand that the change in you are one person and then it's funny because before when I was a Christian, I was always like, nah, I'm not gonna be like that. I'm gonna be a doctor or something in a really powerful position, and now I'm a stay-at-home mom. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't call that a
importance
not
we
powerful
recognize-
position, but
No, you betcha.
That
maybe
is the power.
Yeah.
You have the power of life, Mama.
I have
Power of
a
life.
job and other things, but I don't have to qualify. Yes, power of life. I do. It is an awesome job, and I'm not gonna sell it short. But I'm just saying that, like, I think now I feel like it's my choice and not some rebellion.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I feel like
Absolutely.
it's like, yeah, no, this is what I'm doing right now, and it's not okay, and it's totally okay, and it's
That's
not
cool.
going to be judged by
Mhm.
the people around me who are supporting me. They're going to
Yeah.
support me for
Mm.
the strength that I bring to the table,
Mhm.
not the role that I bring to the
Right.
table. You know,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I will say that the gender roles, they are kind of comforting sometimes. We were kind of talking about that a minute ago. There was this song, or this video of this guy who had made a hollowed out canoe, and it's just really kind of that traditional gender role of like men being like woodworkers, and so he's just doing this, this carving out this canoe out of one big tree, and it's like a traditional dugout canoe, and it's done in, like, I don't know, like Sweden or something, but it's this really beautiful video, and they kind of show the process, and you just hear all this like noise of hacking away at this log, and this nice music playing in the background, and for some reason there's this like really visceral comfort of the idea of like being like the wife of that guy, and like being in the house and like baking and just like hearing him work. For
That's
some
funny.
reason, that is the best thing in the world for that moment in my head. I'm like, why is that? So I'm still, I want to be a professor. I want to do all this stuff, but still like, it's like this internal, primal kind of thing. Like that feels so nice, and so like at home. It's really. So I'm not sure that that's
I see.
specifically Christian, but it's like I think it's just part of like feminism. Yeah. Feminine. There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I really idealized that sort of scenario when I was younger. So I think I have similar feelings towards that.
And that's like a year ago. I've been out of that mentality for a while, but it's still, I don't know. It's just in my own head, in my own house. I'm like, that sounds really great. And I can't explain what it is, but it's just, I think it's evolutionary, so it goes back a lot further than gender roles that are imposed on women. But it's there sometimes.
Yeah. So I just want to ask you all if you have anything to conclude with, or if there is a channel you want to plug or talk about yourself or what you're doing. Just a quick snippet, because I think I personally have to head out. So, but definitely I'm hoping, and you ladies can tell me if this will work for you, to do this on the first Monday of every month. And if you can't, join, that's fine. But I would love to have you here again, and certainly feel free to reach out to Secular Hangouts if you want to host your own secular hangout, whether it's public or private, because we're trying to bring in the community, the secular community, by giving them a place to talk. And it may start off as a stream, and you might want to talk to them just privately. And I'd really like to. We're trying to build that. So. So I hope, first Monday of every month.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. And then, so we'll just go right down the line. Rachel, do you have any thing? Tells people where to find you, or do you have a channel or anything?
Yeah. So first of all, I just wanted to say this was really great. I loved sharing my story and hearing your guys' stories. That was really awesome. You can find me on YouTube. I don't have any YouTube content yet, but I'm probably going to be putting out some videos at some point in the future. So my channel is Rachel in Reality. And if you can't find my channel, because apparently it's hard to find, then if you go on Twitter and look up Rach in Reality, we'll probably put it in the description box, but I have a link to my YouTube on my Twitter, Rach in Reality. Yeah.
Right, Mrs. Snarky?
Yes, I have a YouTube channel, Mrs. Snarky, and I can also be reached at Mrs. Snarky on Twitter. And I mostly just debunk woo stuff. Well, maybe not so much debunk as just laugh at. But, I have fun. Sometimes I do interviews with people who are coming out of New Age or any kind of theist belief system. So, yeah.
Courtney?
I am a co-host of Atheist Edge, and that's on YouTube, Facebook. It's also on Stitcher as a podcast, and on iTunes. And I'm also president of Metroplex Atheists. So that's a local group in DFW. You can find us on Facebook and especially Meetup. I know there's a lot of secular communities around DFW, and there's a lot of atheists. Dallas Fort Worth.
Okay.
Being in Texas, people just say that and everybody knows. So sorry, Texas, Dallas Fort Worth. So I know there's a lot of atheists throughout the country who aren't aware that there are local communities around. I've found Meetup to be really a great tool to find local groups. It's how I found mine that I ended up being president of. So it's a really great way to connect to events that are happening and groups, and find that community that you may have lost being deconverted. So that's always good.
Great. And Heather?
So Christine and I are starting a podcast called Forsaking Faith, and our first 3 episodes should be out shortly, where we've recorded them. We're just working through the logistics. So you can look out for that, but you can find us at Twitter at Forsaking Faith. We also have a Gmail. It's just forsakingfaith@gmail.com. And we also have a Facebook page, Forsaking Faith, and you will see our 2 pictures on all of those platforms.
Yeah. And I hope, we all see you. We'll hopefully we'll keep this group and we're not going to expand it too much, because this really Secular Communities is about intimate conversations where we can really work through our journeys. But I also have been thinking. So world, give me some grace on this, okay? I've been thinking about starting a YouTube channel that focuses specifically on emotional development through deconversion, by looking at each of the different processes. And Heather in my podcast is relating to that. But more importantly, because we're on Secular Hangouts, please, if you want to be part of a Secular Hangout or if you want to host one, let us know. We're trying to grow a community of intimacy. And so please, subscribe, and share with your friends. Like all friends.
We're nice people, we promise.
Yeah. All right. So we will we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Nice to meet everybody.
Thanks for
Godless
Journey. Thanks to Godless Journey and Atheists for allowing us to host on their group. All right. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.